Death at Gallows Green, Chapter 47. The extraordinary drama of murder is always placed against the backdrop of ordinary life. Lord Dutton, the Queen's barrister. The live and let live which had been crowded at the inquest into Sergeant Oliver's death was jammed to the rafters now, several days after the murder of Russell Todd. 3 chairs had been set up at the far end of the room in front of the trestle table that would serve as the desk for Coroner Harry Hodson, with deference to the women, the girl child who were expected to be seated in those chairs. The coroner had ordered Russell Todd's coffin placed out of doors, where the jury could view it before they took their seats in the long benches arranged at the right angles to the table. Sanders, the publican, in his usual too-short trousers and heelless slippers, his bald pate gleaming, was briskly clearing away the last of the glasses and bottles from the bar. His fat wife was collecting the remains of the beef and mutton pies that had graced the tables, and promising, so voce, that more would appear as soon as the inquest ended. Sooner, if the suppliant would walk to the kitchen. Outside, above the babble of voices and the clatter of horses and harness, came the rusty voice of old Willie Hogglestock. Old Willie had discarded his apron for the occasion and donned a green corduroy waistcoat as long as the groom's, buttoned to the throat with brass buttons. Much to the dismay of the publican's wife, old Willie had pulled up his cart directly over the way and was plying not only his regular trade of fish, fruit and vegetables, but offering as well as halfpenny slices of pineapple, ham sandwiches for a penny halfpenny, baked potatoes from a brass potato can that was hung over an iron fire pot, the whole contraption ingeniously suspended from the back of the cart. Beside him, cleverly stationed to bask in the reflected glory of the brass potato can, was a young boy with a basket of walnuts, lifting his brown-stained fingers and crying in a musical voice, "Fine walnuts! 16 a penny! Fine walnuts!" And beside him, cross-legged on a blanket surrounded by pairs of old shoes, sat a swarthy man, a gypsy with a red neckerchief and blue checkered shirt, calling, "Boots for tuppence, 4 pence a pair, buy boots." It was into this jangle of sights and sounds that Kate came with Agnes, little Betsy wide-eyed between them, Edward close behind. Bea had wanted to attend, but her cold had prohibited her, as well as the prospect of possible newspaper publicity. "It would not do to have my father read my name in the newspaper connection with the murder," she had told Kate. "For all he and Mamma know, I am safely at Long Milford sketching squirrels." Edward had discussed the matter with the coroner, and both agreed that Bea's presence would not be required so long as Kate would testify to the discovery of Todd's body. As Kate pushed her way among the crowd of people outside the live and let live, she made a mental note of the sights and sounds that turned the ordinarily quiet Lamb's Lane into a bustling fairground, intending to tell Bea all about it in detail. She was not surprised at the commotion, for the village of Dedham and the hamlet of Gallows Green had been humming with speculation about the manner of Todd's death and his possible connection with Sergeant Oliver's murder and Betsy's kidnapping. The expectation that all would be revealed had lent to the inquest the electric excitement of a magic lantern show. The villagers, to a person, it seems, had turned out for it. Inside, the spectators opened the corridor for Kate and Agnes to pass through. The publican, acting as both host and bailiff, showed them to the chairs in front of the table. They were barely seated when a wispy clerk perched on his stool and silenced the din with his shouted, "Gentlemen, the coroner!" Magisterial in girth and manner, Harry Hodson appeared, seated himself in the oak chair, and signalled the clerk to read the proclamation. Upon its conclusion, the coroner began to call aloud the names of the jurors who were to be impanelled. It would be sufficient, Kate knew, for a verdict to be returned by 12 men. Owing to the importance of opacity of this case, an extra 4 had been summoned. One of the 4 did not appear, and the coroner, without regard to any excuse he might offer, levied a 40-shilling fine. Of the remaining 15, a white-bearded elderly man named Walter Dutton did not appear willing to participate. "Sir," he said, in answer to that name that had to be twice shouted at him, "my presence here is purposeless. I am deaf, sir, stone deaf." Harry Hodson did not hesitate. "Then you are excused," he whispered in a voice so low that Kate hardly heard it. The deaf man rose from the bench and made for the door. The coroner pounded his gavel on the table. "Mr. Dutton," he roared, Take your seat or stand in contempt." Chagrined, Mr. Dutton sat down once more, and the coroner administered the juryman's oath. Meanwhile, Kate sat nervously, her gloved fingers clutching the folds of her sedate, dark lavender dress. "Do you go first?" Betsy whispered. "Perhaps," Kate said, looking down at the pale, freckled face. Since she had discovered the body, it was likely that she would indeed be the first to testify. "Are you afraid?" "A little. Are you?" Agnes had not wished Betsy to appear in open court, especially in view of the fact that she alone was able to identify Todd's killer. In fact, for the days since Betsy's safe return, Agnes had not let her daughter out of her sight, and Edward himself had forsaken his other duties to stand guard over the house. But Coroner Hodson had required the little girl's presence, and Edward reluctantly endorsed his decision. Confronted by the coroner's authority and Edward's concurrence, Agnes could not refuse. "Yes?" Betsy said, apprehensive. She glanced over her shoulder as if she were looking for someone. Kate took her cold hand. Tom Brock sat sullenly in a chair not 15 feet away on one side of P.C. Bradley. His hands and feet were manacled, and he wore such an ugly look that Kate shuddered when she looked at him. On Bradley's other side sat the thin, anxious-looking man she knew must be James Napthon. "You don't need to be afraid," she said reassuringly to Betsy. "Your mother and I are here with you, and Uncle Ned is just over there." Standing by the wall with Sir Charles, Edward lifted his hand to them. Betsy smiled shakily and waved back. The inquest did indeed begin with Kate's testimony, and she was called to the witness chair at the coroner's right hand. The clerk, bearing a leather-bound testament, got down off his stool and came around to the table to administer the oath in a sing-songy voice. "The evidence which you shall give to this inquest on behalf of our sovereign, the Lady the Queen, touching the death of Russell Todd shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God." Kate assented, and the coroner began his examination. His questions about the circumstances of her discovering the body were not new to her. They were the ones she herself would have asked had she been the coroner. She answered them simply, clearly, and with dispatch. Nevertheless, she was glad that it was done and excused. "There, you see," she whispered to Betsy when she returned to the chair. "It was not so bad after all." "Not for you," Betsy said tremulously. She looked around once again. "You didn't have to say who it was that killed him."